It's time to take a look at the October 2025 Justice League of Discord community voted tier list. And today we're going to also be comparing that tier list against mine. Now, if you don't already know how it works, Justice League of Discord is a community managed and community voted tier list. It's designed to aggregate the votes of the community and try to give both an accurate reflection of what the champion tiers should be and also an accurate reflection of public perception of the champion. Now, there are several of us who vote in the Justice League of Discord tier list who also have our own tier list, but we all believe in the mission that Justice League of Discord is trying to accomplish. If you want to be part of the ever-growing community, use the QR code that's on the screen now, or you can join the community directly by clicking the link in the description of this video. With that out of the way, let's jump over to the tier list and we'll get started. Now, for comparison's sake, if you want to jump back to this portion of the video, if you don't have my tier list handy, I'll leave it on screen for just a moment, but we are going to be spending most of our time in the Justice League of Discord tier list. Now, you can see we do have several champions that are moving on the tier list, and I believe all of those champions moved up rather than down. We also have Queen Hippolyta, who is entering the tier list for the first time, and similar to the way I'm doing my personal tier list, you'll see that Swamp Thing is not present here, and that's mainly because we just don't have a critical mass of people who can provide their own determinations on the champions. That basically there's only beta players who have access to Swamp Thing to be able to rank him, and there are only a few of us who have him at enough stars to be able to make those determinations. So no Swamp Thing here, but we do have Queen Hippolyta, and we can actually start with Queen Hippolyta. I know that if you've been watching a lot of the videos on my channel over the last couple of weeks, we have covered her extensively. We've talked about the saga from her kit being completely changed and then reverted back within 24 hours. I discussed that on my podcast with Unstable Gamer, and we've discussed it in several other areas. So I don't want to spend too much time here, just to say that it's pretty obvious Queen Hippolyta should be S tier. And I agree with the community assessment here, throwing her in at S tier at the very beginning. She just works in so many different lineups and meta brawl, and she's actually quite useful in a lot of other areas of the game as well. She isn't the greatest in combat cycle, but I think if you have certain team comps that do need a little bit of extra healing, you can use her there. But she just, because of her impact in PvP settings, she's just incredible champion, and she's also really good in anti-crime network and training simulators. We also have Scarecrow, who made it into S tier on this tier list, and he's a champion that I've mentioned in the past that I've considered moving up into S tier. I don't disagree with this ranking at all. He's definitely on the fringe there between the two rankings. So perfectly fine with seeing Scarecrow in S tier. He works in a lot of lineups, not just the kind of normal run-of-the-mill Legion of Doom setups that you see in a lot of meta brawl on most servers, but he also obviously works with Arkham's Most Wanted, which is becoming a more important lineup for heavy spenders, I would say, in Wales to have as part of their combat cycle rotation. There's a couple of bosses there that Joker can do incredible damage on, and he's able to do that because of champions like Scarecrow being in the lineup. Not to mention, Scarecrow can get used in some hybrid Justice League Dark lineups along with Sinestro, because he's able to debuff bosses and enemies so that they can have more spiritual damage done to them. So it really helps with Constantine and Sinestro being able to put out a lot of damage. Now, you'll see for the healer and support champions that there are a couple of champions here that are going to be different from my tier list. I obviously moved Crypto down into A+ tier a few weeks ago. I guess it was last month. And I obviously stood by that for the October tier list that I put out a few days ago. I think that Crypto is an incredible champion, but he suffers from a major flaw in Meta Brawl in that he his animations take way too long for his skills, and it takes a little bit too long for him to cast his ultimate. Now, obviously, with Queen Hippolyta, with having her kit reverted, I think Crypto is in an interesting spot because with Queen Hippolyta being able to keep Superman family alive while Crypto is digging for bones, it actually brings him back to a point where he's much more usable. I've seen where I've actually been winning a lot more fights recently, especially after getting Queen Hippolyta to 1 Red Star. I don't have an issue with him being in S tier. I don't think it's going to hurt anyone to be building Crypto. I do think he's still kind of a must build champion depending on what lineup you're going after. Superboy made it into S tier on the Justice League of Discord tier list this month. I also have Superboy in S tier on my tier list and completely agree with this one. I think just over time with more people investing into and testing Superboy, we can see that he's just very clearly the best support champion in the game. That was a title that I would say probably went to Zatanna in the past, but Superboy is able to just do what she's able to do on a higher level, and he's able to do it outside of just, Justice League Dark lineups. He can be inserted into pretty much any lineup, and you're going to get some use out of him. And obviously, he's ridiculously good with Superman family. Ra's al Ghul made it into A plus tier. That's a champion that I definitely moved up on my rankings. I moved him into A tier, but I gave him the Meta Brawl designation that if you are using him there in certain lineups, he's definitely an A plus tier champion. He moves up a tier. So perfectly fine with him being at A plus tier here. The only caveat that I want to give to this ranking is there are some champions that I see people valuing them super high, but they don't have them invested super well. I don't want to discount Raish's abilities in Meta Brawl and PvP comps. I just want to caution that he fits in that same mold as Deathstroke, where probably not going to be as good in the PvE modes. Obviously, still really good if you can invest into them. Like Deathstroke is really good in most modes. There's just champions that can outclass him in some of the PvE modes like Combat Cycle. Ultimately, I disagree a little bit with this one. I think Raish should probably be an A tier with a caveat that he can do well. He can do better in PvP than in PvE. The next champion to talk about is going to be Flash, because Flash did move up a tier from A to A+. I'm happy to see that the community has moved him up a little bit. Clearly, he is just an indispensable resource for a Combat Cycle and for really any game mode where you can control your champions on manual, and really even in Meta Brawl and game modes where you can't control manually, like if you just like to use your teams on auto. If you know who the champion is that has the highest attack, you can still use Flash on auto and get pretty good results. You just have to make sure that he's going to be buffing the champion that you need him to buff. Happy to see him in A plus tier. Really, really, really good champion that I think most people should be investing a little bit into. Even non-spenders should probably be trying to get a few shards of Flash. He's one of the more accessible champions along with Sinestro because you can buy him out of the League contribution store. So don't sleep on Flash for being able to get your wing condition to ult more often. A couple of champions worth mentioning that are in A plus tier that I've moved out in the last couple of months, and that's going to be Wonder Woman and Martian Manhunter over on the Warrior and Guardian side. So with Wonder Woman, I've just found that, especially with some of the newer champions coming into the game, I don't want to discount her impact. She's still an incredible champion, 100% worth building, especially for non-spenders and light spenders. Once you're able to ascend her to the mythic status, she's going to do incredible things for Justice League Dark and for other team comps. You can use her pretty much from day one of the game. You're going to be using her with your Justice League comp, and she's probably going to slot into some of your 3v3 teams just so that you have some tanks and protection there. So she's definitely a champion that's worth using. Obviously, we've talked about my rankings and the way I think about champion ranks. So I think A tier is still an incredibly good value for champions that you're building. The thing that you have to remember about this Justice League of Discord tier list is it's a little bit different from the way that I view my champion ranking. So what A plus tier is basically top tier characters in one or more game modes, but not all game modes. And I think that tracks fairly well for champions like Wonder Woman and Martian Manhunter. Now, for Martian Manhunter, the interesting thing here, and I still have a PvP caveat for or designation for Martian Manhunter. I think he's still A plus tier for PvP for Meta Brawl because he is a hard counter to Constantine and other AoE damage dealers. From that perspective, I 100% agree with the way Martian Manhunter was voted into A plus tier because he's a top tier champion for specifically for Meta Brawl, and he can do well in some of the other game modes. I've had a couple of people sending me screenshots of Martian Manhunter hyper carry teams that are doing pretty decent in combat cycle if that's the person that people have kind of invested all of their resources into. There are a ton of champions, especially in the S tier and some of the A plus tier here, that can out damage Martian Manhunter in combat cycle, but he's not completely useless. Like his mechanics with the counterattack can be actually quite devastating depending on the boss you're fighting against. We got a few champions in the A tier and B tier that we should probably talk about as well before we close this video out. The first one is going to be Bane. Now, I have Bane in B tier, and we're kind of splitting hairs here. Like a lot of these changes from my tier list to the Justice League of Discord tier list are just one rank off. And with Bane, I don't necessarily disagree that Bane is I'm not saying he's a bad character or anything. I think that if you use Bane in the right lineup, which is pretty much Arkham's Most Wanted at the moment, then he's going to be a ridiculously good champion. Now, I'm curious to see some folks who heavily invest into League of Assassins to see whether Bane is able to go with them in any game modes, or if there are any revelations that we get once more people have access to Raish and Talia al Ghul. I know that there has been some early testing to see whether Bane works in like Meta Brawl lineups and things like that with League of Assassins, but I haven't seen definitive testing to show that he's worthwhile in Meta Brawl. So that's kind of one of the big reasons why I have him ranked where I do. But just wanted to point out a couple of differences there. And then the last champion that moved ranks in the October edition of this tier list is going to be Adam. He moved up from C tier to B tier. This is probably another one where not sure if I agree. I think he has very niche use cases, but I have seen him capable of doing some things in Meta Brawl and Training Simulator that suggest that he's definitely a champion worth using and having in your level sync. I just don't think you should be spending massive amounts of force on him. And the designation again for Justice League of Discord tier ranking is that a B tier champion is kind of middle of the road. They don't really excel anywhere, but they are a pretty decent pick. And I can get behind that. Again, some of these rankings are going to be different from the way I rank a champion versus the way the tier list is set up. And we worked really hard to make sure that these tier ranking guidelines that we have are set up so that it cuts out a little bit of the subjectivity that you'll see from an individual tier list. And I'm definitely okay with a B tier ranking for Adam because I think he is a really good champion for new players and non-spenders to use as kind of like a flex option for certain teams. Now, I don't want to dip down into the B, C, and D tiers too much more. I've talked about plenty of these champions on my tier list and on my channel enough to where I don't want to be duplicative too much, but a few more champions that I just want to quickly mention. We have Talia and Green Arrow, who stayed in A tier for the Justice League of Discord tier list. I moved Green Arrow down to B tier and left Talia at B tier. I do think that Talia is a really strong champion if you invest in her. Unfortunately, she seems like one of those champions that you do need to have her legacy piece and extensive force investment into her and high stars for her to be, worth using. And I just feel like League of Assassins is just not a tag synergy team that you really want to be putting a lot of time and investment into. So she, for that reason, I have her a little bit lower on the tier list. Definitely a champion that I'm watching because I know some of you folks in the global launch servers, as soon as you have access to her, will probably be able to figure something out that we haven't had the time or opportunity to figure out on the soft launch servers. For Green Arrow, again, I mentioned this on my tier list video last week, but I just feel like he's a champion that these legendaries are going to continue to, their stock's going to continue to fall as we get new mythics and limited mythics into the game. And that's just kind of where we're at with these legendaries is a lot of them just don't make sense to be in the higher tiers because you have better options available. If you have two champions that do kind of the same thing, they fill the same niche, and you have them both at the same level, but one of them is a higher rarity, then that just doesn't make much sense to me because the stats scale differently. So if you have, let's say, Robin and Deathstroke at the same level, then that it doesn't make sense because Deathstroke and Robin do about the same thing as far as like what they do in a team, but Deathstroke is going to be doing it better, all things being equal, because he is a limited mythic champion. Now, you could have two assassins who are at the same level, let's say like Raish and Deathstroke, for example, here in the Justice League of Discord tier list. That makes a little bit more sense. Like that argument you can get behind a little bit more. Stat scale essentially the same. They just have different kits and ways of operating. But I just want to point out, that we got to be careful with these tier rankings, especially with the legendary champions. You can't leave them ranked super high just because they're easy to use and easy to acquire. Don't want to discount that they're incredible champions that are worth building. I think that's something that I try to express in a lot of my videos is that a champion like Green Arrow is incredible for non-spenders and light spenders. We just have to rank all the champions, including the ones that are difficult to acquire and more expensive, in the same place. And just from a philosophical standpoint, you got champions like Supergirl, who there's been a little bit of controversy, out in the community recently about Supergirl. Personally, I think she is perfectly fine at S tier. The issue is that she does take a lot of investment in terms of having to pull for her and Superboy kind of in back-to-back bleeds in a lot of situations for people, and then also having to have crypto up and running. And realistically, you want to have that full four-person Superman family team going. So you've got 3 Mythic Plus champions in the same team, and it kind of sits in that same area as like Legion of Doom, where it's just an incredible investment to be able to get the team going. Not quite as much investment as Legion of Doom because you really do need to have Lex at like red stars, so you kind of have to daily deal him up. At the end of the day, I don't think you move a champion's ranking down just because they're a high investment champion. You put a champion where they're capable of being. And, a lot of these champions, like you're not going to be doing 25 and 30 million per ult with Green Arrow, so he's not going to be an S tier at this point in the game. Champions like Supergirl, I've seen people do like 100 million ults with Supergirl. She makes sense to be in S tier because at the high investment levels, she's going to give you a lot of bang for your buck. And I'd say that same thing goes for a lot of the other champions that are in S tier. I mean, Scarecrow is deservedly an S tier because he's a champion that even at purple stars, you can do crazy things with him. You can beat levels that you didn't think you could beat. Super strong, like best tank in the game for sure. There's a lot of philosophical things that go into trying to come up with these tier rankings, and it's things that you should know about the way I think about tier ranking and the way some of the folks who are putting some of these other tier lists out there are thinking about tier ranking as well. And I'd love to hear comments from all of you on these types of topics. So, don't feel bad about leaving a negative comment. I try to listen to every comment that I get on these videos, whether I'm able to respond to the comments or not. I'm definitely looking and trying to take that feedback into consideration. So, with that being said, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about the Justice League of Discord tier list for October 2025. Let me know what you think about the way I have reacted to it, and any of my thoughts. I'd love to keep that conversation going. You can also join my Discord, or again, the Justice League of Discord server is going to be linked down in the description as well if you're not able to get there from scanning the QR code that's on screen. As always, if you like this video and you want to see more DC Dark Legion content like this in the future, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and if not, that's fine. I hope to see you on the next video.